Welcome back, Go Glammers. You've made it to the end of the day. Well done. So what we've got for you today or this afternoon or this final session is Hugh and I basically having a conversation. We're doing a little bit of a wrap, just reflecting on the day and answering that important question of what's next. So Hugh, I might just ask you what you learned today.
So many things, Bonnie, so many things. I learned that the open source values of accessibility, transparency, and ownership are also values that can help enable native sovereignty or indigenous sovereignty in online technology. And I learned that our Ngatakanu project team started with the problem that the people they were trying to assist had actually identified themselves, and then worked with those people to produce the solution, rather than building the solution and then kind of looking for problems to solve with it, I guess, which so often happens. That was a pretty exciting way to start the day. What did I learn from Mark? I liked Mark's approach that the thing that he likes the most about his tool is that it works. Which I thought, set yourself achievable goals. This is
right. Absolutely, it's the small victories. Yeah,
exactly. I also learned that many people in our audience were really mad that Mark hadn't invented the Open Journal Matcher about 10 years ago before they started writing their thesis.
That was absolutely a theme. I saw just outrage after outrage of how that could have just simplified life.
Come on, Mark. What are you doing, man?
I was disappointed, Mark. Just a little bit.
And I also actually really liked Mark's kind of insight that every software project is built on a pile of assumptions. And even if you're making software yourself, you're nearly always building that on top of things that other people have built. And you're therefore building it on top of their assumptions, even if your assumptions are different, which I thought was an important point to make.
I think for me, I completely agree that what was really impressive, I think, throughout all the presentations was it's not just about the project. It's also unpacking the thinking and the ideology behind it as well. Do you know what I mean? Like, so often,
absolutely, yeah.
I think with a lot of GLAM stuff, we see this is what this is the project. This was the very measurable, deliverable outcome, and this is why you should do it too. Whereas we saw a bit more of that, definitely critical thinking, but just even unpacking the thinking behind it. So, with our first project, it's maybe not the specific project, but definitely taking on board the way it was approached, that kind of thing. It's with Mark's project of really unpacking our own positioning. And as you said, when we build on the work of others, we're to some extent inheriting that privileged position or the assumptions that go with that. So I think that kind of stuff is really interesting as we move forward.
For sure. I think it's been really exciting to see that was a consistent theme through all our projects. I mean, Liz talked about this a lot, explaining to people the why, not just the how. But that, as you say, also is important when we're thinking about. It's not just important in teaching people skills; it's also important in thinking about the products we're using and the systems we're using. Why was it built that way? What are the assumptions sitting behind that? What are the expectations? Which is why I liked Mike's talk so much about Akisto, and the kind of why for that is we have no idea what technology people are going to be using in 20 years, but we know that they're going to want to access this research that is being, and this data that is being created now. So how can we create a system that is really flexible and usable, but doesn't expect that the same technology stack is even going to exist for future researchers, which I thought was a really smart way of thinking about it.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think, again, that sort of we're thinking, you know, in the past, the present, and the future. There's sort of this lineal thing happening, and I think that sort of deeper approach to projects is really interesting. So that was really great to see. So in terms of, I mean, we could continue speaking about what we learned because there was just so much, and I can't wait to sort of go back into the chat and have a look and really, you know, now that some of the nerves have eased, be able to actually watch the presentations and go, oh yeah, okay, as opposed to sitting here going, oh, is everything working? So big full day in terms of learnings and lots to take away. That other question that we have in terms of what's next.
Yeah, and this is the whole theme of LCA 2021. What's next was sort of the theme we were presented with when we pitched GLAM, so MiniConf, and we asked all of our speakers to talk about what's next. And I think they've all done that pretty well. I mean, I think for Ngarukamu, what's next is, I mean, we had a bit of talk during that and shortly after that presentation about, oh, this tool would be really fantastic in this other context, and that may well be true. But personally, I think what's next is that we all need to really learn from the, as you said, the approach that they took. What's going to work in the local context for the local community that you're working with, and you've got to work with the people who are your future users, and it's got to be led by them. I think that's, for me, that's what's next, is for us all to think about what are the processes we normally use when we're developing projects, and what can we learn from that about how we do that. I think what's next, what Mark is hoping is what's next is that we all put in amazing pull requests into Open Journal Matcher and help him to make it even more awesome. What's next for my project is kind of the same thing. I would love to get some data from people, and the great thing is that Liz has taught everybody how to do that now. So you know, what's next is that you can all get onto GitHub and start issuing pull requests, right?
But I mean, that's the, you know, like if we take that a step further, I mean, in terms of what's next, it's about creating those skilled communities and collaborating on projects, and I think that's, you know, that's incredibly important to start. I mean, really, we're talking, we start to get into the realm of collectivism, right? And that, I think, challenges a lot of the ways our institutions and employment, I'm just going to lay it out now, Hugh. I'm just going to say that the way things have been very much about the individual, and, you know, precarious employment pits us against each other. And when we work in GLAM, knowledge is currency, right? So sharing isn't fostered, because if I share it with you and then you and I compete for the next contract, I've really done myself a mischief, right? So maybe I withhold that information because I don't know when the next job contract's going to come. So if we can fight against that with active sharing, skill set building, collaborative projects, a sense of community, I think that's incredibly powerful, but also potentially subversive.
I totally agree, and I think it's to go a step further. It's not just pitting individual workers against each other, but this is what happens with institutions as well. We all of our institutions talk about how they love to be collaborative, and they're all about making information freely available. And yet, those of us who work in cultural organisations and higher education organisations know that the reality is a little bit different. It's highly competitive. Everyone's competing for funding. And every organisation wants to be the first one to do something, not the second one to update the documentation, or, you know, make the incremental but important improvements in the background that you know, funders and big decision makers don't notice. So maybe you're right. That is what's next, is for us to all think about what we can do to change that culture, I guess.
Yeah. So I mean, I guess it's and I think I might have touched on it earlier, just sort of in passing, is that idea of an open source mindset, and how many shared attributes there are with the way we, you know, if we would describe libraries at their best, there's a lot of shared attributes there. So I think fundamentally it's in us as GLAM workers. Do you know what I mean? Like fundamentally those open source, open knowledge, all of that open mindset is with us and probably what drew us to the profession. It's about possibly, like how do we bring that into the institution, or how are we able to enact that as GLAM workers? Does that make sense?
It makes sense to me. Hopefully it makes sense for everybody else. I mean, it's really about how do we get our institutions to actually really do what our professions and our organisations say that we're all about. How do we make it actually about that, not just talking about that? I think we have, I know you may have missed some of this, Bonnie, because you haven't been as in the chat as I've been able to be. But we've already seen a little bit of that today. So Mike obviously talked about Akisto and the various use cases for that. And Simon in the chats was saying, oh, this actually could be really useful for a CMO. Maybe I should look into this. So, we may have already made a connection there. Molly talked about the fact that the University of Tasmania has openly shared all of their Amica documentation, and that was really helpful for the State Library of Western Australia. Now, personally, I think we should all make a big deal of thanking UTAS for doing that and kind of highlighting that as a really fantastic thing to do. That's probably saved, the State Library of Western Australia hours and hours of time kind of fiddling about trying to do stuff. So we can, and we've talked about this in previous iterations of GoGlam, making our institutions' practices really generous and then making a big deal about it, so that we sort of, the nice way would be to say we sort of normalize it, but I suppose another way of thinking about it is we kind of shame some of our less generous organisations into being a little more generous in their behaviour. Yeah,
I think celebrating, celebrating generousness and openness as core values of the profession is really powerful. I think just on those connections, and again, you're absolutely right. I didn't sort of get to jump into the chat because other things were going on. So I'm
doing a great job hosting us, Bunny. That's
thank you. It was easy when all the presenters were amazing. But you and I both attended the 2 previous GLAM mini conferences, and one of the really that I couldn't stop talking about, and what I continued to look forward to, was the interactions, the building upon knowledge shared during the day, and this building of a community that occurred at the 2 previous events. In your opinion, do you think we've managed to achieve some of that today in our online environment? So we're not sharing sandwiches, but do you think we got close to that?
It's interesting. I wonder if we'll be able to measure this in some way in future. I feel like we've either equaled or actually surpassed the way that we've done this in the past. I've seen in the chat that there's been people have been connected with other GLAM techie networks that they didn't realize existed, or there's been a few like, oh, you should talk to this person, they're really interested in similar things to you, or did you know about this tool, it seems kind of similar. I've already seen on GitHub some people who are here, I've noticed, have been in the repositories of some of the projects that have been talked about already. I myself have already had a pull request from somebody who's here at this mini-conf to improve my map already. So, it's all happening.
It's wonderful. I mean, that's the outcome that we wanted. So I think in summing up now, because we're out of time, Hugh, I wanted to say thank you to you as co-organizer. You've done so much work liaising with all of our wonderful presenters, so thank you for that. I wanted to shout out to all of our presenters. Thank you for incredible volunteering your time. It's been amazing. And I know that there's going to be lots of feedback on what we've seen today. And I think we'll actually have an enduring conversations and communities moving forward. And also a big shout out to the tech team who have just been like
Yes.
5-star. So thank you, tech team. Thank you, Linux Conference, for allowing us to have this space. Hugh, did you want to say anything before we wrap up?
I really want to thank you, Bonnie. You've done a fabulous job emceeing. I kind of bullied Bonnie into doing that by herself. So thank you, Bonnie. I also want to say thank you so much to the AV team. They managed to wrangle 5 co-presenters for our very first session who were in a completely different time zone, a couple of whom hadn't managed to do a tech check until 15 minutes beforehand, dealt with someone accidentally muting themselves. They've just been absolute stars. I also want to thank everyone who's actually been, participated. I was about to say in the audience, but I don't think that's actually accurate, who've participated in our mini-conf. It would be nothing without you. And it's been really, again, really generous how people have sort of given each other tips and leads in the chat and really been really enthusiastic about it all. It's been so exciting to be part of. It's been fantastic that we've managed to have an international conference this year. And I'm really energized to see where this all takes us in the next year or two.
Oh, absolutely. Energized is absolutely the word, and it's what we get from this conference. All right, so that's Hugh and I wrapping up. That's our Go GLAM LCA 2021 wrap. Thank you, everyone, and we'll have a quick chat. And then it's probably wine time, do you think?
Definitely wine time. Or afternoon tea time, or whatever is your tipple of choice.
It's time. All right, lovely. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for a wonderful day.